Getting more to the practical elements of how market makers perform their tactics, we need to understand the ideas of market depth, liquidity pools and order clusters. Market depth is simply the amount of money necessary to move the market by one tick. This varies according to the market and also according to the area in the chart. Order clusters are areas in the chart where many orders are placed together due to widely known ideas about technical analysis. For example, traders who use obvious highs and lows to trigger trades usually place their stop losses in very obvious areas in the chart, and there is an enormous number of traders who do this. These order clusters serve as tipping points for market makers because it would be extremely wasteful, if not impossible, to actually drive the market by large quantities. This would be quite difficult even for the largest groups of market makers out there. When the market approaches an area where there is a cluster of stop orders, market makers only need to drive the market by a few ticks to trigger these immense clusters. Once they do that, a whole chain of psychological effects begin to take place in the minds of the stopped-out retail traders. For example, many traders who get their stop triggered immediately want to recover from their losses, so they will try to enter the market again in the opposite direction. This is something that actually helps the market makers drive their positions to their desired side. This is also part of the reverse psychology dimension of these manipulative games. Once again, don't worry too much about not understanding how all these things work in combination right now. It will get clearer in the practical examples. When we look at the charts, we have an intuition that the market is completely flat and that all market levels are equal. Nothing could be further from the truth. One of the jobs of a highly skilled trader or speculator is to identify the market levels that are deeper than others because those are the levels that will impact price the most. These are also the levels that will form market edges in the future. You might be wondering how these clusters end up being formed, and the logic behind that is quite simple. The clusters are formed by millions of retail traders believing the same axioms about standard technical analysis. There is a huge amount of people who attempt to trade the market in a rather impulsive and reckless way, and they only use the most obvious places in the chart to place a stop-loss order. Needless to say, market makers love that fact because it makes their life so much easier. For example, too many people place their stops a few pips above or below an obvious entry level, like the break of a high or a low in the market. This is probably the most obvious way in which market makers can steer these people. The cynical fact is that these people are miles away from even being aware that they are being manipulated on a psychological level. This is also one of the reasons why it's so important to study behavioral economics because you can learn how to identify certain emotions in real time, which can prevent you from falling in the same psychological pitfalls repeatedly. Once again, market makers are highly skilled in this type of job. They are like con artists of the financial market. They can create illusions without even appearing on the stage. If there is a game that is worth learning about, this is probably the one. When price reaches a cluster of orders, a liquidity pool is created, which is nothing more than an enormous amount of supply or demand depending to which side this happens. When there is a huge supply or demand, market makers can get extremely large positions in the market without being noticed, and without changing price action too much. Simultaneously, market makers capitalize on the retail traders' necessity to recover from their stopped-out positions. The huge mass of retail traders who are constantly looking for revenge in the market is actually a necessary force to drive the market makers' positions in their desired direction. Ironically, market makers need retail traders to create those obscene amounts of profit and finish their twisted little game. Most retail traders are really not happy when they find out about this, but there is actually no one to blame. Market makers are playing a fair game. The ethics of this game is obviously questionable, but there is nothing illegal about this because it's based on a feature of the underlying supply and demand mechanism of the markets. The issue is that this inherent feature of the market only appears when the underlying mechanism of supply and demand of the markets is taken to an extreme, which is precisely what market makers attempt to do. Beyond the ideas of market depth, order clusters and liquidity pools, we also must understand that there are several types of retail traders in the market. The most common and obvious example are the retail traders that operate with a raw intuition about highs and lows of the market. However, we have retail traders that watch several widely known technical indicators like moving averages for example. Large traders can also use the main ideas surrounding these indicators to manipulate their users. We can extrapolate this situation to basically all concepts of technical analysis that have a sufficient degree of fame. I will try to illustrate that in the practical examples of this course. The reason for this should be simple to you at this point. Any tool that has a significant amount of people trusting it in the market is a potential manipulation tool for the large traders because the axis of thinking that these large traders will employ do not change. The only thing that changes is the place that people will place their stop orders, which is a relatively small detail if you compare with the psychological steering process that is involved in all manipulations.